Pat Boone finally tells the truth about Elvis Presley at age 91. Pat Boone was born Charles Eugene Boone on June 1, 1934, in Jacksonville, Florida, USA. He is one of America's most popular and versatile entertainers. He is a symbol of good looks, faith, and artistic flexibility. He was born in Nashville and grew up there. Notch State. Boone had strong roots in Southern values and Christian teachings, which later became important parts of both his personal and professional life. Before getting his degree in speech and English from Columbia University, he went to David Lipscomb College, then called David Lipscomb University, and North Texas State University. His education helped him develop his polished stage presence and articulate charm. In the 1950s, when rock and roll was first becoming popular, Boone first caught the attention of people all over the country. He quickly became famous as a clean-cut alternative to rebellious artists like Elvis Presley, who was known for his smooth vocals and good looks. Boone started his career by recording cover versions of rhythm and blues hits originally performed by black artists. This choice has been praised for bringing R&B to white audiences and criticized for appropriating black culture. Nevertheless, his versions of "Ain't That a Shame" by Fats Domino, "Domino Tutti Frutti" by Little Richard, and "I Almost Lost My Mind" by Ivory by the late 1950s, Joe Hunter had become a huge commercial success and had introduced many people to music styles they might not have heard before. Boone had become one of the biggest names in American music. He had more than 38 top 40 hits and sold more than 45 million records, including 6 #1 hits. Millions of people loved his smooth ballads and romantic crunching, and parents who didn't trust rock and roll liked him too. Pat Boone's popularity didn't go away quickly. He was second only to Elvis Presley in terms of chart success that decade and even had the same number of fans. Boone's success wasn't limited to the radio charts. He also became a TV star, hosting his own variety show called The Pat Boone Chevy Showroom from 1957 to 1960. This weekly show featured both established and up-and-coming musicians and solidified Boone's status as a household name, going beyond his work in music and TV. Pat Boone also worked as an actor, and he was in more than a dozen movies, such as April Love 1957. 1957 for Bernardine State Fair in 1962 and Journey to the Center of the Earth in 1959. His acting roles were mostly like the person he was in public, respectable, romantic, and morally sound. This helped him stay popular at a time when people's tastes were changing. Hollywood loved Boone as a leading man for feel-good movies for young people. Besides that, he was known for not taking on roles that went against his personal beliefs. This sometimes limited his options but also helped build his reputation as a good guy. Pat Boone's influence went far beyond the entertainment industry. As a devout Christian, he used his fame to promote faith-based values, often speaking at evangelical events and writing books on Christian living, family, and personal morality. He wrote several bestsellers, including Twixt 12 and 20, a guide for teens that sold millions of copies and hit home with both teens and their parents. Boone also got involved in many political and charitable causes, especially those that supported conservative and religious ideas. Boone was never afraid to say what he thought, even if it was different from what most people thought. He also used his fame to have an impact on moral and cultural debates. In the 1990s, Boone surprised both fans and critics when he released In a Metal Mood No More Mr. Nice Guy, an album of heavy metal covers performed in his classic crooner style. Boone appeared on the American Music Awards and got a lot of media attention. The album was meant to be a tongue-in-cheek tribute to rock and metal classics, but it became a cult hit and introduced him to a younger generation of fans. Pat Boone has done a lot, more than 50 million records, over 2,300 recorded songs, multiple gold albums, and a reputation as one of the most important crossover artists in American pop music. But behind the numbers is a legacy based on honesty, faith, and consistency. Boone's refusal to give up his values for fame became a defining trait of his personality. Unlike many stars of his time, whose careers were marked by scandal or excess, Boone lived a steady, scandal-free life, remaining married to his high school sweetheart Shirley Foley, daughter of country music legend Red Foley, until her death in 2019 after 65 years of marriage. They had 4 daughters together, including Debbie Boone, who went on to become a successful singer with the hit, You Light Up My Life. Boone's life and career are emblematic of a bygone era of entertainment, a time when artists were not only judged by their talent but by the values they represented. In many ways he remains a symbol of wholesome American culture, often remembered more for what he stood for than for any particular performance or record, yet it would be unfair to overlook his enormous contributions to the popularization of early rock and roll, his success across multiple mediums, and his trailblazing role as a crossover artist. As of the 20s, Pat Boone has continued to perform, speak and advocate for causes he believes in. Now in his 90s, he remains a spirited and articulate figure, offering reflections on music, life and faith. His longevity in the public eye and ability to remain culturally relevant despite changing times and shifting norms reflects both his talent and tenacity. Now in the twilight of an extraordinary life and career, 90-year-old Pat Boone, the famous American singer, actor, and author, has written openly about his complicated and often misunderstood relationship with Elvis Presley. For decades, fans and music historians have wondered what the real relationship was like between Boone and Presley. Both were huge stars in the 1950s and helped shape the rock and roll revolution. While they were both young, charismatic, and chart-topping performers at the center of America's cultural transformation, their paths were very different in terms of style, image, and personal beliefs. With the clarity and wisdom that comes from living a full life, Boone has felt a growing desire to set the record straight. He has started to share more personal stories, unspoken feelings, and observations about Presley that he had kept private out of respect for his fellow entertainer and the intense public scrutiny that surrounded them both. Boone talks about how, at the height of their careers, the media often exaggerated or made up stories about their rivalry, creating a story of competition that was far more sensationalized than real. Boone now says that he had always admired Elvis for his raw talent, deep devotion to music, and the sheer charisma he brought to the stage. He remembers meeting Presley early in his career in recording studios and on TV, describing him as surprisingly shy off stage but fiercely dedicated to his craft. Boone was one of the few people in the industry who saw early on that Elvis wasn't just a trendsetter or a heartthrob, he was a revolutionary force who would leave an indelible mark on American culture. However, Boone also talks about how their careers were different. While Pat built his reputation on clean-cut, wholesome performances that were in line with his strict Christian upbringing, Elvis adopted a bolder, more rebellious image that made him an icon of youth defiance and sexual liberation. Boone is honest about how this contrast changed their public personas. Even though he was often seen as Presley's safe alternative, he never disliked the king of rock and roll's popularity. In fact, he often thought that Elvis's success opened doors for other performers, including himself, by broadening the definition of what popular music could be. Boone also talks about how sad he is about Elvis's life. He says that he was broken by Presley's slow fall into addiction and loneliness, especially since he knew how much pressure there was to be a famous person. Boone remembers wishing that he could have helped Elvis more, that maybe if there had been more honest conversations, more supportive friendships, or more spiritual guidance, the outcome might have been different. Boone has been a supporter of faith for a long time. Elvis was looking for a deeper connection to God, a purpose, and peace, but he was too often surrounded by people who fed his fame instead of feeding his soul. Boone now admits that he underestimated Elvis's staying power at first, but he quickly came to respect the depth of his musical genius and emotional expressiveness. Elvis had something raw that you couldn't teach, and Boone says he tapped into something primal that spoke directly to people's hearts and souls. He wasn't just a performer, he was a phenomenon. Boone talks about real friendships, casual conversations about faith, fame, and the stresses of becoming famous all of a sudden, performances on early TV shows, and even late-night phone calls where both men told each other their fears and dreams. Not only did their musical careers differ, but so did their spiritual lives. Boone, who was a devout Christian all his life, stayed true to traditional values and often used his fame to promote moral issues, while Elvis publicly battled his own demons. Fame and trouble in her personal life. Boone refuses to cast judgment. Instead, he offers empathy and insight into the toll that stardom exacted on Elvis, calling him a sensitive soul crushed by the weight of being larger than life. Boone's late life reflections are filled with a mix of admiration, sorrow, and gratitude. He speaks of Elvis not just as a cultural icon but as a vulnerable man, brilliant, tormented, generous, and misunderstood. It took me a long time to see past the glitter and noise, Boone confesses, but when I did, I saw someone who longed for peace, for love, for a place to rest. I wish we had talked more. In the end, I wish I could have helped him. Now, as Boone looks back on a friendship that was more subtle and respectful than sensational, he finds peace in remembering the moments of kindness, admiration, and quiet understanding they shared. Elvis was a good man, Boone has said in recent interviews, his voice heavy with emotion. He had a beautiful heart. He struggled like we all do, only his struggles were played out in front of the world. I wish more people had seen the real Elvis, not just the artist but also the person. For speaking the truth about Elvis at this point in his life isn't just about putting to rest old myths, it's also about honoring a fellow artist who, despite personal problems and public pressures, changed the world with his music. By doing this, Boone also cements his own legacy as a man of compassion, faith, and lasting honesty, as well as a performer who once competed with Elvis on the charts. Pat Boone has had an amazing music career spanning decades and is one of the most productive in the history of popular music. He is thought to have officially recorded more than 2,600 tracks during his amazing journey as a recording artist. This ridiculously high number not only shows how hard he works and how dedicated he is to his craft, but it also shows how versatile he is and how much he produces. It's rare for artists of any era or genre to have amassed such a large collection of recorded songs. Boone's extensive discography reflects an artist who consistently delivered new music to his audience, often covering a wide range of styles from pop and country to gospel and standards, thus securing a lasting legacy in the music industry. The sheer volume of his recordings also suggests countless hours spent in studios, collaborations with talented producers and musicians, and a constant drive to evolve and appeal to a broad audience throughout his career. Pat Boone achieved significant commercial success, with 38 of his singles breaking into the coveted U.S. Top 40 charts. This impressive tally of charting hits solidifies his place as a major figure in American pop music, especially during the 1950s and 1960s when he was at the height of his popularity. Among these 38 hits, he reached the #1 position on 6 occasions, a clear testament to his widespread appeal and the resonance of his music with the listening public. Securing the top spot on the charts not only symbolizes commercial triumph but also cultural impact, as these hits became defining songs of their era, played extensively on radio stations and influencing other artists. The fact that Boone's singles always make it to the top 40 shows how good he is as a musician and how well his career has been promoted and managed. Pat Boone held the record for the most weeks in a row with at least one single in the U.S. Top 100 charts, a total of 220 weeks. This was one of the most impressive and long-lasting records he ever held. This amazing accomplishment shows a long period of popularity and importance that few other artists have been able to match. Being on the charts for more than 4 years straight meant not only making hit after hit, but also being able to connect with fans even as their musical tastes and trends changed. This record shows Boone's amazing consistency and his unique place as a steady presence in the American music scene. Keeping this record for such a long time further solidifies his legacy as an artist who ruled the airwaves and was loved by fans for a long time in pop music history.